If you wanted me to make out a check to pay my bills, I can't do it because of Judge
Lyman.
Judge Lyman and the Biden people who are behind the case of the two women.
And say hello, because that law firm watches every show of ours.
Oh yeah, well, watch us.
Or some poor sap, some associate sitting there watching.
Well, you always watch us.
You could probably learn a thing or two.
Right now, you've tied up all of my bank accounts with restraining orders. You're trying to take every piece of property that I own, and you haven't even had the judgment affirmed on appeal. And come on, you got to admit it's a pretty questionable judgment at $145 million. You didn't have $145 million in damages. In fact, there's video of you doing what I said. We can play it for you if you want. You frame it. You had a judge who's bloodthirsty, January 6th sentencer, the biggest January 6th sentencer, who told the other judges they weren't giving strong enough sentences. She figured out a way to manipulate it, so I never got a trial on liability. I never got a trial on damages. You never proved damages, and you got $145 million. So I'm appealing it. You would think that they wouldn't be allowed to take all my property until the thing was affirmed on appeal. And I got a chance to show them that they never let me show the tapes that show them quadruple counting the ballots. Oh, they say the machine was blocked or but nobody comes to fix it. And anyway, when you look at it, I'm entitled to that interpretation. I mean, that's one of the things it looks like. Okay, I'm a lawyer. I put it in evidence, and I can ask you to interpret it that way. That's the way I interpret it. And then another one is they're passing these little hard drives that we maintain we use to fix the machines, right? And they say it was candy. Well, you look at it, it looks like a hard drive to me, and they told me it was a hard drive. And there's no proof that it was candy.
You'd think if Rudy Giuliani was stripped of all of his worldly possessions, including his Mercedes, his watches, and his rings, and in his apartments, that would be enough for him. Nope, that's not enough for him. There's a new motion for contempt, civil contempt filed against him, requiring an appearance on December the 12th back in Washington before the very same judge, because he continues to violate a consent agreement where he agreed not to continue to bash and dox and defame the same plaintiffs that hold the $150 million judgment against him, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. We're going back to D.C., everybody. And Rudy is this close to going to jail in D.C. I thought he was close to going to jail in New York. I'll break it all down for you. You're here on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. I'm Michael Popok at The Intersection. Yes, I've done reporting in the last week about the rings and the watches and the apartments and the Mercedes-Benz all turned over to mother-daughter team Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. They were just doing their job. They were lowly paid or no paid election workers counting votes in Fulton County, Georgia in 2020. But to Rudy Giuliani, they were a part of a mass conspiracy, a worldwide global conspiracy involving Venezuelans and Colombians and Smartmatic and Dominion Voting. And they were sticking in thumb drives to change votes. No, they were exchanging a mint between mother and daughter while they were doing the counting. Completely exonerated, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss was. Didn't stop Rudy Giuliani from continuing to defame them and dox them and emotionally put them in emotional distress. And a jury in D.C. hit him with a $150 million judgment. And we've been reporting about the collection of that judgment, but there was a little known fact there. After Rudy ran to bankruptcy court, which failed, he had to enter into a consent agreement, a consent decree with the judge, enforced by the judge to make him stop continuing to defame Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. He agreed to that over a year ago, but he's already violated. I guess all excited about the election, he decided to go on his podcast on 2 days, November 12th and November 14th, and repeat the exact same lies against Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss that he did before. He must think he's Donald Trump. Except Donald Trump doesn't have a consent decree that's enforceable by a federal judge who now wants to see Rudy on the 12th of December. Let me read to you from the new motion for civil contempt that was just filed against him. Hold these two thoughts now. He's in federal court in New York about the $150 million judgment. And there's a hearing coming up on that related to whether his Florida condo near Mar-a-Lago is going to get turned over, which it should. And that he has to have postponed that hearing until after the inauguration, which he plans on going to. And now we're back in the D.C. federal court in front of Judge Beryl Howell. Now, he not only bashed on his podcast, which I don't think anybody listens to, but it's still a podcast. He bashed not only Ruby Freeman and Shay, he bashed the judge. Why not? Said the judge was out to get him and all the rest of that. Let me read to you from the motion, though. And this is from the second page, the first page of the motion. In his latest act of defiance of court orders and continued defamation of plaintiffs, defendant Rudy Giuliani has clearly violated a permanent injunction, an injunction to which he consented less than a year ago, prohibiting him from repeating his false and defamatory lies about plaintiffs. Therefore, the court should hold him in contempt. They talk about the $148 million judgment, and they say in the aftermath of that verdict, Giuliani continued to repeat the same lies that he had been adjudicated as false and defamatory. Plaintiffs then brought an action in the bankruptcy court, and Mr. Giuliani ultimately agreed to resolve that action by lifting the stay and consenting to a permanent injunction in this court, D.C., barring him from making any further claims that plaintiffs had engaged in wrongdoing in connection with the 2020 presidential election or something similar to that. So here's what happened. Mr. Giuliani is now brazenly violating the consent injunction. In two recent broadcasts of his nightly show, Giuliani claimed and unambiguously referencing the plaintiffs that, quote, they never let me show the tapes that show them quadruple counting the ballots, that his tapes showed plaintiffs passing these little hard drives. They were mints that we maintain were used to fix the machines right, and they say it was candy. Well, you look at it, it looks like a hard drive to me, and they told me it was a hard drive, and there's no proof that it was candy, and that you can see, if you want, in living color, her quadruple counting votes and the people thrown out of the arena. This is the exact same set of lies that got him into trouble in the first place. In particular, they also said, they outlined it on page 4 of their motion, it took only 6 months after he agreed to the consent injunction to resume his defamatory campaign. As plaintiffs continued their efforts to enforce his judgment against him, defendant Giuliani aired an episode of the live stream program America's Mayor Live, number 537, live coverage of Trump transition 2024, in which he stated as follows. Now, if you want me to make out a check to pay my bills, I can't do it because the Judge Lyman and the Biden people who were behind the cases of the two women, you didn't have $145 million in damages. In fact, there's no video of you doing what I said. There's video of you doing what I said. We can play it for you if you want. You framed me. You had a judge who's a bloodthirsty. This is now Judge Beryl Howell, who's ordered his appearance on the 12th of January. This ought to be fun. You had a judge who's a bloodthirsty Jan 6 sentencer, the biggest Jan 6 sentencer, who told the other judges they weren't giving strong enough sentences. She figured out a way to manipulate it, so I never got a trial on liability. That's because he was found in contempt of court by violating 9 different court orders because this is before he lost his law licenses. I never got a trial. I never got a chance to show them, the jury, that they never let me show the tapes that showed them quadruple counting the ballots. And then another one in which they're passing a little hard drive, right? But then they go on. They say on the 4th, that was on the December the 12th. On December the 14th, in another episode, he said, and these women where you can see if they want to, in living color in the arena, we have a video that contradicts it, 145 million. This is a violation of the consent decree. He agreed that he would not do this again and that the judge would enforce it. And so they're arguing that this is clear and unambiguous violation of the court's orders, that the court has the ability to find civil contempt sanctions to ensure future compliance with the consent injunction. I'm sure they're asking for money, but he doesn't really have any money. So they'll have to have something, some sort of fine. Here's what they said. fixing the appropriate sanction. This is on page 10. Particularly fixing an amount sufficiently calibrated to coerce his compliance in light of his demonstrated willingness to repeatedly violate court orders may require fact-finding by the court. In other words, we may need another trial to figure out what he has left, and we can't trust him to begin with. Plaintiffs therefore propose that the court hold Mr. Giuliani in contempt and schedule a prompt hearing to determine the appropriate sanction, like the shape of the sanction, given his financial condition and his evidence of judgment-proof assets that the court confronted last time. And the judge took one look at this file today and said, yeah, we'll see everybody on the 12th of December in person in my courtroom to discuss it all. So that's going to be a very busy day for Giuliani. He's busy turning over and fighting assets and asset turnover for the $150 million. And now that he spent the 12th and 14th of November attacking the same two people all over again, he's going to end up losing. I don't even know what he's got left. I mean, as my grandfather would say, he doesn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. What's left? And so we're going to find out what's left. And this judge, Beryl Howell, who obviously Rudy said some impertinent things about, we'll see what she does. Let me tell you about Beryl Howell. She was the chief judge of the entirety of the D.C. Circuit Courts, federal. She was responsible for all the grand juries, including the ones that ended up indicting Donald Trump. She also was responsible for making decisions about the search warrant against Donald Trump and about subpoenas against Donald Trump, and ultimately ruling that it was more likely than not that Donald Trump committed crimes with his lawyers and stripped those lawyers of their attorney-client privilege. That's all Beryl Howell. So in the world of the Jan 6 MAGA, like Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani, they hate her, all right? But she doesn't really care. She's not going anywhere. She's got a lifetime appointment. If Biden or Kamala Harris had won, I would have put her on the short list for the United States Supreme Court. And there's no love lost there. She sanctioned Rudy Giuliani a year and a half ago during the trial for defamation about 9 times. The final sanction was almost the death penalty. She found that he could not put on a defense, that liability had been established by sanction, and the only thing left for the jury to decide was the amount of the damages. That's where we're at. And now that same judge is going to decide whether Rudy Giuliani is in contempt. And if you want to find out more, you know where to go right here on Legal AF. Hit the button, free subscribe. I'm sitting at the intersection of law and politics on a regular basis. I got other contributors that do the same thing. I'm glad you're here. So until my next hot take, my next Legal AF, the podcast, I'm Michael Popok, and I am reporting. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.